Hello, welcome back to Coffee Break Live. I'm the GM Philosopher. I hope everyone's having a great day. I am having a great day. I'm happy to be on my coffee break, although I didn't get the time to make any coffee, so I am actually without caffeine for this little excursion. I'm going to have to refill my caffeine after the show. Today we're talking about developing NPCs. Now I have been thinking about this since we ran session 2 of the Barren Lands last night. If you want to catch that, you should grab it um, in the live section of my YouTube channel. You can watch episode 2 of the Barren Lands. And here's what really happened in the Barren Lands last night. One thing from my perspective as I ran the game, I really worked on developing kind of the two NPCs who are with the group. Um, these NPCs, one is named Luna. She's like an Azamar female who has two different colored eyes, and there's been a little bit of mystery about what's going on with her. She seems to do alchemy type things and at least has some kinds of magic. And then there's a big dude named Lotto who's like has kind of like a sumo wrestler vibe. And so in episode 1, they were very much like back. They were pulled back from like, in other words, I didn't do much with them. And the reason for that was because it was just it was like the first session and I wanted to kind of let the players have the spotlight more. But having immersive NPCs is really important. And in session 2, I took some steps to make these NPCs more developed. And that's what I want to talk about today. Let's go to these comments real quick. Garrick is in the house. How's it going, Garrick? Let's see here. Oh, good question, actually. Looking at the artwork, we're wondering why it's such an assumption that female characters don't have high strength rolls. I mean, there's a statistical tendency, but averages are not enforceable. Interesting. I did not, I've never really thought that there was an assumption that female characters wouldn't have high strength rolls. That's super interesting because I mean, I've had like, I've run like female fighters who had like 19 strength. And so I guess I never really thought that there was an assumption. Is there an assumption about that? Chat, let me know in the chat if you think there's an assumption about that. I think that would be interesting to discuss, actually. Mr. Vincent's in the house. John Haney's here. How's it going, John? Robert H is here. How's it going, Robert? Good to see you. Leslie is here. Hello, Leslie. Great to see you. Blim Blam is here. Hello, Blim Blam. It's great to see you too. Now, I want to basically talk about this, and feel free to drop your comments about any of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in the chat. And I'm going to open it up to call-ins here in a little bit, as usual. But here's what I want to talk about first. I want to talk about my steps in developing these NPCs that I created. So, in session 1 of the Barren Lands, they were not as talkative. They were not expressing their personalities as much. Partly this is because I was still kind of trying them out, trying them on for size, so to speak. And part of it was because I wasn't wanting to like do a whole bunch of stuff with them. I was wanting the player characters to definitely take the most of the bandwidth, right? But then there comes a time when you do want to start to develop those NPCs. And in episode 2, they got a lot more development. A lot more of the personality came out. For example, Luna, she sort of started to reveal to some of the others that she does worship some kind of god or goddess, but that she doesn't want to say their name, and she seems to sense things. Kind of like spiritual or magical things a little bit. And she seems to do at least a little bit of healing magic, but the healing magic she does has a strange effect where it makes the consumer feel guilty about it. So there's like some interesting things coming around there. And then with Lotto, it turns out he's just like a big fighter, wrestler, sumo kind of dude. And he seems to legitimately train. He does a bunch of things that like make it seem like he normally does exercises, like he was squat lifting the crate and he was pulling the giant scorpion like like if you were pulling a weighted sled. Like these are just things like I noticed. And he also was very interested in meals. Seems like him and Hector were talking about cooking up one of the scorpion claws, and he was basically saying, I feel like we should cook it like you would a lobster, maybe with some pepper and some lemon. He was like talking about it, very excited about cooking the meal. So a little of his personality was coming out. And I want to talk to you just a little bit about how I go about developing NPCs like this. So here's what I do. I start off with like there's the character and there's their backstory, but that's a little different than figuring out what their actual personality is. And even if you know what their like ideals are, even if you know what their bonds are, even if you know like a lot about like actually their character and their values, this does not mean that you're going to know their personality. Not a jester's in the house. How's it going? Not a jester. Jason says, I made it. And then says, wait a minute, this guy looks different somehow. Yes, I chopped off my hair and I got a beard trim. So I do look different, if that's what you're talking about. Absolutely. I needed a new style, needed a new do. I was feeling sloppy with the long hair. Although I calculated it out. That hair had been growing for 8 years. So anyway, but I'm happy with it. Super happy. Uh, anyway, so now with that being said, all of that is different from knowing the personality of the NPC. How do we develop the personality? So we know their values, maybe we know the background, but extrapolating out a personality is actually, I think, more nuanced and more artistic. So I literally prepared for these two NPCs by doing a thing. I was thinking about characters from like TV shows and stuff that I wanted to maybe emulate. And this is interesting. I actually watched a lot of The Dark Crystal and Kira, the character. I like watched a lot of videos of her as I was preparing to roleplay Luna. And I thought to myself, maybe she's kind of like personality wise, maybe she has Kira's personality type. So I was watching Kira to get inspired. But as I was watching that, I realized, okay, there are some elements of her personality that are going to be like her. Like she speaks in a very the way that she says things is very, I'm going to label it like kind of drastic up and down. Like she'll make a statement like this and then she'll fall down to a whisper. And so this is kind of like the way she talks. And for me, that's a big deal. Locating like the mechanism by which an NPC talks. And then Lotto, I figured out a lot of his like mannerisms always kind of come in a deep breath, exhale fashion. So he will say this a lot of times. It will be like this. I am used to working out, but I do not like the cold. Right. So I kind of figure out his way of talking and the way he usually talks. But then there's like, okay, well, but what do they care about? What do they do? And I use my instincts for that. It's like very instinctual. So like I know some things, and I can't share some things about these NPCs because it'll be spoilers if anyone from the game is watching. But like I'm thinking, and it's like, okay, I know what Luna cares about. And if I know how she vocalizes and how she interacts with other people, then I can start to create like a junction between the things she cares about and then how she would express things like interest or express things like concern. And so like how would that manifest? And every time there's a new situation, it's very groundbreaking in the sense that we're kind of formulating the basis for what her behavior is going to be going forward. And one problem with some NPCs is that if you don't figure out that basis and keep it consistent, the NPCs can feel lifeless and empty. They kind of feel like empty shells walking around. So keeping a consistent framework on their character and the way they express themselves is really important for immersion. And so for me, there were lots of new situations for NPCs in session 2. For example, Luna displayed actual trust and honesty for like the first time. So this was kind of groundbreaking in the sense that this had not happened before. She expressed to the elf ranger, or no, it wasn't the ranger, it was Faylene. She expressed to Faylene that she didn't trust her at first because of her pointed ears and she says, "That's strange. I'm not used to seeing people like that." Which, so she kind of gave away, and the party doesn't know why. No one's really asked about it, but she kind of gave away that elves were like not common to her. Like she maybe had not spent a lot of time around elves. So it's sort of a clue. But once Faylene helped her with a thing, she realized, or no, it was after the wolves attacked, and she saw Faylene fight the wolves when Faylene could have actually, like, because they were both outside, Faylene could have easily left Luna to the wolves, but she didn't. She like fought the wolves and got hurt doing it. So she was like, "I see you must not want me to die. Thank you." And then she's like going to heal her. So it's like, so they developed a little bit of trust, because before then Luna had been acting very snarky and had been kind of like provoking Faylene, seemingly now looking back on it as an attempt to kind of provoke the real Faylene, because she's like, this pointy-eared person seems untrustworthy. So that was like an interesting new direction to go in. And as we go in these directions, it's really important to kind of solidify what these characters care about. And I always run my NPCs as like one or two dimensions of caring. So so Luna cares very much about, she seems to care very much about trust and whether or not she can trust someone. And she seems to have one person she's always kind of following around. So that's like one aspect of her personality. And then there is another aspect of her personality that she seems really passionate about, actually like alchemical type stuff. So those are two things that really kind of came out in session 2. And so it's like, if I know those things, that gives me a huge clue into how to make her decide where she's going to go, what she's going to do, and then how she's going to express herself. She's always going to express herself probably in a way that will gravitate toward those things that she likes and is interested in. Mr. Vincent actually asked a really good question here. Where do you draw the line when an NPC becomes a GM player character? And not you specifically, maybe, but some GMs might give too much bandwidth to NPCs. Yeah, no, this is super true. And I've heard a lot of like bad stories about this. Let's talk about this for a second. So DM NPCs are characteristically they're characteristically not liked, and I see a lot of hate about them in my comments a lot of times when I talk about running NPCs. Now, here's the magic line. NPCs are one of the most profound opportunities to create emotional impact and emotional connection with characters. Interesting NPC interactions are good. This is good. They're better than empty shell NPC interactions. Empty shell NPC interactions are better than no NPC interactions. But if we could go up beyond empty shell, even up to beyond interesting, if we can get to the point where NPCs actually like evoke emotional responses in our players, we have great power to make the game feel more real and more immersive. So like in a lot of my campaigns, what will end up happening is NPCs will develop a close bond with maybe one or more of the player characters. And you do have to tread a fine line between having them be like a GM player character. An NPC shouldn't be a GM player character. They should be someone who once in a while does things that help to forward the story, or as a tool to create emotional connection between the players and the game world. So, for example, Luna is developing relationships with several different characters. She's started developing a relationship with Soul first, and then with Faylene. And I'm sorry if you don't know these names. This is just from my Barren Lands campaign, but like, so she started, she kind of trusted Soul, but he was like a paladin. So he was like very obviously seeming trustworthy. And so it would make sense that she gravitate to him. But then once she kind of developed a bit of a trust with Faylene, she seemed to gravitate more toward Faylene. And then when Omen, Mr. Vincent's character in the game, got interested in the insides of the Scorpion, she kind of bonded with him over that. And so they, started doing alchemy stuff together. Now, what will probably end up happening is that if Luna sticks around and doesn't die, or if the party doesn't kick her out or something, what will probably happen is she will continue to build relationships with the characters. Now, what I don't want to do, and this is what I think a GM doesn't want to do, a GM does not want to make the story or put the spotlight on the NPCs. At least not at all for very long. And if they're going to, it should have something to do with the player character. And that's the number one best reason to have an NPC do anything, is if it affects or is seen by or will interact with a player character. And that is a fantastic opportunity to do something, evoke some emotion, stir up some mystery, get someone interested, give them something interesting or mysterious to see, make an argument, start a fight, whatever it is. It should serve the purpose of creating connection between that player and the game. And NPCs and actually villains are two of the most powerful ways to do this. Another way is pets, but I'm calling them NPCs. These things are all way more useful for this than like one-off bad guys or like random wild animals or inanimate objects or locations like rivers, trees, caves. These things don't have a personality. It's difficult to get emotionally connected to things like that. Now, where it goes too far is when the GM starts to think, oh, I want this character to do this. Think about the NPC. But the motivation is that the GM thinks it would be a cool thing for the NPC to do, and it doesn't necessarily highlight a player character, right? The player characters are the main characters. And if you take the spotlight off the main characters and you point it at the NPC, and then the NPC does a unique individual storyline thing that isn't designed to get the player characters more emotionally connected to the game world, then you're probably going too far with them. That's my I talked a lot about that, and I'm not sure if I explained it right, but it's kind of a complicated topic. Shabam. There's my there's my 2 cents on that. Garrick says, "Wrecking the Brew, excellent question." Wrecking the Brew. I think he was talking about Mr. Vince. Oh, Mr. Vincent Wrecking the Brew. Yep. Okay. Not a Jester says, maybe the humble farmer just wants to be left alone. He knows nothing and wants to keep knowing nothing. But gosh darn it, the players keep bothering him about the mysterious tower near his apple farm. So this is actually one of the best things that could ever happen with an NPC. And let me explain this actually. So the very best NPCs are the ones who start out not being important, but they're made important by the player characters. In other words, the player characters chose them. For what reason? Who knows? Sometimes it's because you describe them as being attractive. Sometimes it's because one of the player characters are bored and they decide to take an interest. Sometimes it's because you describe them as having big muscles and someone thinks, ooh, they could be a fighter for us. There's all kinds of different reasons for why a character or a player character might choose an NPC. But if you thrust an NPC onto the player characters may or may not accept that NPC. They may or may not even like that NPC. And you want to be careful not to keep injecting an NPC in there that's not a villain or something that the players don't like. And when I say don't like, I don't mean like don't have positive feelings for. I mean they don't have any emotion for them and they literally don't care about them. That's the kind of NPC that you just want to say, okay, we're done. We're done with that NPC. So in this case, players keep pestering the farmer. At first, you might not have thought anything about this farmer. You might have put him in there as a shell NPC just to give them a little bit of news about the gravel road and to point them in the direction of the next village. But then they keep asking him stuff. So this is going to maybe force you to think, you know what? I was not planning on this farmer being important, but now I have to think about like how he's going to respond to all this. And then you begin that process of developing that NPC. Your player characters might offer him a job, or they might try to kidnap him and take them with him, depending on what kind of players you're playing with. Smink Sangsura's in the house. Hello, Smink. How's it going? Hey, drop your comments or questions about running NPCs in the chat. I would love to answer them. I'd love to chat about it. This is a good conversation, and I would actually say that, not to toot my own horn, but I would say that if I specialize in anything and I'm super comfortable with any aspect of GMing, it is running, I would say, compelling NPCs. I feel like I probably had the most good response with that. So I love this topic. But anyway, so you might develop this farmer. This farmer might become very important. And then at some point, the farmer might get real, right? So at first, he's like an empty shell. Then you turn him into an interesting NPC. Okay. I like to describe this as he's not yet sentient. He's not contemplating his own existence. He's just doing things, and it's all really based on what the player characters are doing. But then at some point, if he gets enough care and enough attention, and he becomes important enough, he will become self-aware, and this is where he becomes what I would call like a main NPC, or an NPC who is more deeply you more deeply immerse yourself in as the GM. This is the kind of NPC who contemplates their existence, who contemplates their relationship with the player characters, who contemplates their place in the world, and then takes action accordingly. Once again, they're not becoming a player character. They are becoming an NPC who is self-aware, very, very invested in, someone with an emerging arc of their own that runs alongside and supports the player characters, but who has their own feelings about it. And this is one of the best opportunities for things like romance, arguments, people who favor one PC and then they act bad toward the other. Like, one of my favorite tactics is to have an NPC really like one of the player characters and then kind of like go a little over the top in always taking their side and talking down to one of the other player characters, like kind of trying to form a coalition against them. Like, those kinds of things can really bring a lot of like spiciness to the game. They're pretty, I mean, that's how people behave. So it's like not really out of the ordinary. It's not out of the realm of the possibility, but also this gives you an opportunity to actually evoke emotion. What's going to happen if they gang up with this player character and then they start talking down to the other? If that other player cares at all, they're going to feel a little bit of actual real anger toward that NPC. This is a very good thing. If you start like a little romance and you describe how this, NPC, how attractive they are, or you describe how they're flirting, and you notice that the player character is interested in pursuing that, or they flirt back, or they buy them a drink, or they go to hold their hand or something, then it's probably a sign that it's like this player character finds this NPC interesting. Their character finds them interesting. This is and then what that'll do, there's a strange way that D&D romances go, because it's not like the GM and the player, they're not really a part of it. That sounds kind of strange. They're just role playing this fun kind of thing. The player has the character might have an attraction for the NPC. The NPC will have an attraction maybe for that character. But the emotion on the player side will be something sort of like, it'll be sort of like a protective instinct, or maybe even a territorial type instinct, almost like they would feel if they had a magic weapon and they didn't want thieves to take it and they really valued it. It's sort of a very similar emotion to that, but then there's like an attraction, like almost biological, physiological undertone. So it's like, that's a really unique way to describe that. Anyway, so Shabam, not a jester. Great question. Mr. Vincent says, thanks, GMPI agrees. Wanted you to state it for the GMs who always seem to go too far, making PCs sit and watch the GM play with themselves. Yeah, no, totally. When I first heard about this, I was really confused about this. I was like, what are people talking about? Because I had never really seen that happen. But after talking to a lot of people, I have realized that some GMs do this. And it's a very bad habit, because why would you ever want to push it? an NPC past the player characters, when the player characters are the ones who the story is about. It's like a mismanagement of it's like a director's mistake. What if what if in the game or what if in the movie what's that movie called? What if in Star Wars, right? Instead of following Luke Skywalker, what if the cameras suddenly went to one of the Jawas, right, who pick up the droids, and then the whole story just abandons Luke Skywalker, and the rest of the story is you watching the Jawa collect scrap and resell it. It's like, what a missed opportunity. The story was about Luke. That's the real story going on. Why do I want to watch the Jawa? Other than when the Jawa's interactions tell us more about the story of Luke Skywalker. We see him interact with them. We see him trade with them. We see this and that, right? That's how we want to think about it. Anything else is a wasted opportunity. Garrick says, kinky session. I have a fade to black policy with in-game like sensuality, things like that. Like maybe describe, the NPC kisses the character passionately and pulls them close. And then, as the wind blows the curtains, in the open window, we fade to black. That's kind of thing. It's the kind of thing. And then I'll say something out of game, like kind of tongue in cheek. I'll be like, would your character, spend the whole night, follow through with only the gods know whatever is going to happen? And they'll be like, oh yeah, for sure. It's like, okay, just so we're clear on what happened between them, and then we will just leave it at that. And then the next day they role play it as if that's what happened. That's kind of the policy I take on those things. It's pretty rare that I go any. There have been some situations where I've gone a little further because there were important plotline elements. Like one time I had this player who was this character was getting it on with this woman who owned a funeral home, and her husband had been the undertaker, but her husband had gotten killed by one of the other party members. This was unknown to the character who was trying to date her, but she had a strange attachment to her ex-husband. And so we went past they started making out and climbing on the bed part. We went actually where I would have normally faded to black. I went past it because there was an important story element to be told. She ended up saying, hold on, wait a minute. And she took the skull of her dead husband and put it up on the mantle and said, I just want him to be here for the first time. And then I wanted to wait and see what the player thought about it. And then he was like, what the F, but that was a funny thing. But then once I got that story part out of the way, it was like fade to black. Right. But sometimes you have to go a little further to put the story elements in. But anyway, shabam. Dungeons 20 says, NPCs is my most worked on elements for gaming. Each one has to have their own personality that can pull some heartstrings maybe, or get characters really hate them, or one that gives advice. Yeah, no, totally. Your NPCs are super great. I especially think like Silent in the Basgoth campaign, very, very cool NPC. Definitely, I as a player care a lot about that NPC, and now Grom does too, although Grom kind of was holding people at arm's length before, so I don't know if he cared about her as much, but now he certainly does, and they're very entwined. So yeah, no, totally. I think that's awesome. And I think that you hit the nail on the head here. Each has to have their own personality. They can pull some heartstrings maybe, or get characters to really hate them, or one that gives advice. These are all emotional responses. And that's kind of what NPCs do really well, which is why it's a wasted opportunity if the GM doesn't run immersive NPCs. Smink says, don't know if you covered this already, but how would you react as a GM to the players being aggressive or threatening with random NPCs as their default to get information, reward, extorting money? That sounds like a normal day in a lot of my campaigns. How would I react to the players being aggressive or threatening? So what would happen is they would probably succeed. They'd probably break some fingers, remove some toes, and get everything they were wanting until they mess with someone who's above their weight class. Maybe they accidentally grab the lieutenant of a crime boss. And then if that guy manages to get away or it's discovered that they took him, now someone's going to be coming after them to break their toes and fingers. But that's just the risk you take when you go breaking toes and fingers, right? Anyway, so that's my response to that. As a general rule, I don't like. There's almost a moral question here. There's almost a moral question here about the aggressive and threatening behavior toward random NPCs. Sound has been cutting out for a second or two at a time. Maybe I need to turn. Maybe if I close this tab, it'll help. I'll try that. Actually, I'm going to. Yeah, that should work. Okay, we'll see if this makes it better. But anyway, so there's almost a moral question here, and I generally like. I mean, players in my. So I have like a PG-13 kind of like rating I put on my games. And so it's like, we don't go past PG-13. So there's going to be some things that aren't going to be chill. But for the most part, I mean, players may do really good things or they may do really evil things. And I just tend to let them tell that story because that's part of the story. Just know that evil sometimes attracts larger evil and good will tend to attract greater good in a lot of ways. So there's like a karma aspect to it, I guess. John has to go teach some kids. Hey, thanks, John. Mark Clement says the camera turns to the fireplace. Totally could. That's actually a good idea. Garrick says light version of murder hobo smink. Yeah, I think that is what Smink was talking about. And murder hoboing goes great until they try to murder hobo the bigger, stronger, meaner, nastier murder hobos. That's how it usually goes. Like, and it's only a matter of time. Sometimes it takes 3-4 sessions for that to happen, but eventually odds dictate that they will run into someone nastier than them. Iskandar says one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got about NPCs is that they don't have to get along with all the PCs. Oh, totally. Yeah. In fact, a universally nice NPC is almost difficult to make work right. You almost need them to be unlikable to a certain point. Otherwise, they don't have any depth or there's nothing interesting about them. It's been very rare that I've run an NPC that was like universally liked that they actually cared a lot about and paid a lot of attention to. That's been very rare. My most successful NPCs have always been very divisive. They were just like loyal to the bone to 1 or 2 or 3 of the party members. And then the other ones, not only did they not care about them, but they maybe even had a beef going with 1 or 2 of them, like very active, like almost fighting all the time kind of beef. Those have always been my most successful NPCs. And that's always been the most successful model for NPCs. It's sort of like in real life. If you try to be liked by everyone, you'll maybe be liked by no one, right? Iskandar says, drop a like, everyone. Heck yeah, drop a like. Also, make sure to join my my Ko-Fi membership. Links in the description. Join the Discord. Links in the description. You can also download my Ultimate Plot Randomizer ebooks. Free ebook I give away to people who join my email list. Link to that is down in the description. And I'm going to take this opportunity real quick to thank our Ko-Fi members, especially our first gold member, Craig. Craig, thank you so much for sponsoring the videos through Ko-Fi. And heck yeah, it's awesome. The ebook library is always growing. So if you want to jump in and be a patron of these arts, then check that out in the description. Garrick says, sound has been cutting out. Yeah, I hope it's gotten better now. Jason says, I also have a PG-13 rating, mostly due to extreme violence and gruesome scenes, with strong language and brief nudity may happen. Yeah, that's how it goes, and that's okay. You know, here's the thing about nudity in games, especially with NPCs. So I think of it, it's almost like the difference between, and I'm not gonna say the word because YouTube has a weird thing about saying that word, but like let's say adult video, okay? There's a big difference between a painting, like a nude painting that's artwork, and then like an adult video online or a sexually explicit image. There are scenes intended to just be physically stimulating, and then there are scenes intended to be artistically beautiful, right? One really great example of actually what I would call artistic nudity took place in the movie Oppenheimer. Have any of you seen Oppenheimer? So there were scenes in that movie that were very, like, there's a lot of nudity, and some people described them as being very pornographic, but they actually weren't very pornographic. I didn't think from a stylistic perspective. I thought that they were actually kind of like, they were actually kind of um, realistic in an art sense that made me think of them more like a show of art as opposed to just trying to be like, oh, look at this nude person. It's like a sexual thing. Um, and I think that in games, that's a very responsible line that GMs should run. It's like, I'm not running an adult themed, like adult entertainment game. I'm running a game that is about art. So if there's going to be a nude scene, I'm going to describe it in an artistic way, maybe like in a visceral, real life way, she dropped her robe to the floor. You see the bruises all over her back from the last fight. She looks skinny. They've been lost in the wilderness. You could see her ribs through her, skin stretched tight over her rib cage. So I'm going to describe the things I notice from a human art perspective. I'm not going to describe like the quote unquote like sexual things, right? That's how I approach nudity in my games generally. Into the Wind says, if you don't make your PCs that special, it's not an issue. Sure, you can bully low-level mooks, but you can't keep that quiet, and then your contracts suffer. If you don't make your PCs that special, it's not an issue. I would agree. Yeah, that's kind of up to the players how special they make their PC, actually. Jason says, I'm making my NPC a lawful evil bard that flirts with the female PCs to try to get what he wants. That's fun. I think that's a fun trope. I think it's fun that way, and I think it's fun the other way too. I have a trope that's like a dark emo, like an emo evil girl who tries to flirt with all of the PCs, men or women. It tries to flirt with them to like get things from them, like to get them to buy her clothes or to get them to buy her weapons or to get them to let her go on missions with them or to let her strike the killing blow. Like, so it's like, I kind of have like a trope in my games that I run, like a dark female kind of seductress character like that. And that's kind of fun. That's a super fun trope to run. Hot Dice says, absolutely. Every NPC has a favorite and not so favorite PC. I think that is actually the best way to do it. Mr. Vincent says, Kinks and Cantrips, new source book for adult 5e. I have seen that advertised, but I have not looked into it. Is it cool? Has anyone gotten it? Does anyone here run adult, what you would call adult 5e? I guess that's like maybe content that goes beyond PG-13, maybe even beyond R-rated. I don't know. Garrick says, Madonna, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, a boy or a girl. That's how my my like dark evil and like a emo NPC girl trope characters tend to run. It's more about what benefits can I get from this person? That's what I'm actually attracted to. That's kind of the trope that I run with. All right. With that being said, we have reached a good stopping point, and I think we're going to call it for the day. I better get back to work, but thank you all for hanging out with me. Thanks for chilling on the chat and supporting the channel, and really appreciate each and every one of you for coming to the live streams. And I will catch you all on the next one. Have a great day. Roll some D100s for me, and boom, catch you later.